Continue with Mariam's second lecture on neutrino theory and phenomenology. Is it okay if we leave the fan running? Yeah.
Yes, okay. Perfect. Okay. So good morning, everyone. So we are going to continue with this lecture of neutrino theory and phenomenology. Yesterday, we discussed the first topic about the historical introduction and neutrinos in the Standard Model. And today, for sure, we will cover neutrino oscillations in vacuum and in matter, and perhaps some of part of this three neutrino phenomenology. Okay? So, just to start explaining how the concept of neutrino oscillations came up, let me tell you that in 1957, Bruno Pontecorvo suggested the possibility of oscillation between neutrinos and antineutrinos. This was motivated by the evidences of oscillations in the Kaon system. There was this observation of possibility of CP violation in the oscillation between chaos and anti-kaons, and then he thought, okay, why not this could also happen in neutrinos? But you should remember by then there was only one flavor of neutrino discovered, electron neutrino. So then the only possibility of oscillation was between neutrinos, electron neutrinos, and electron antineutrinos. Okay? Then, after the discovery of the muon neutrino, these guys, Maki, Nakagawa, and Sakata, they proposed that, okay, since there are two flavors of neutrinos, perhaps there are like two different sets of neutrinos, two of them with definite flavor properties. Sorry. It's okay?
It's okay.
So two neutrinos that with flavor properties, nu and nu mu, and other two with mass, with defined mass, nu1 and nu2, and then they propose the two neutrino mixing. Okay? They were not talking about oscillations. Just they proposed this kind of two different sets of eigenstates of neutrinos. And then, based on that proposal, in '69, Gribov and Pontecorvo actually calculated the oscillation probability in these two neutrino systems. And then they got that the survival probability of a beam of electron neutrinos should follow this expression here, where this theta is the mixing angle. Here, what we call delta, this will be theta, the mixing angle between the states. And delta m squared is the difference of the masses of the neutrinos. Okay? So, I know Maria already told you something about the neutrino oscillations in the, also we discussed yesterday about the Davis experiment. So then the first indications of neutrino oscillations, because before we had just this possibility, this theoretical possibility. But then after Raymond Davis proposed his experiment in the South Dakota gold mine using this 600 tons of cadmium chloride, then there was the first evidence that perhaps something was going on with neutrinos. Why? Because his experiment, he was using this chlorine, and then the idea was just to detect it. The electron neutrinos coming from the sun would interact with chlorine, producing argon and electrons. And then just counting the number of nuclei of argon, it was possible to calculate the number of electron neutrinos. And the surprise was that according to the model of the sun by then, the standard solar model, there was a number of neutrinos that should be detected. So here you have different colors depending on the neutrinos produced in the different nuclear reactions in the core of the sun. But on the total, this is the total amount of neutrinos should be measured according to the standard solar model, but only 1/3 of those neutrinos were measured. Okay? So this was the first evidence that really something was going on with solar neutrinos. And yeah, for this discovery, Davis got the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2002. Okay, so this was the first evidence that something was happening. But then, after the Davis experiment, there were other experiments trying to investigate the same thing. And then, in addition to the chlorine experiment, that is the Raymond Davis, that was observing 30% of deficit of solar neutrinos, there was another experiment, indeed 3 experiments, using gallium instead of chlorine. One in the Soviet Union and the other 2 in Gran Sasso in Italy. But then the idea was similar. And then if you compare the predictions of number of neutrinos that should be detected with the actual detection, then only 50% of the predictions were measured in the gallium experiments. Other set of experiments using water-Cherenkov, as for instance the Kamiokande and later on Super Kamiokande. In that case, they were using as target detection neutrino electron elastic scattering. In that case, there was also a deficit, and only 40% of the predicted neutrinos were measured at the detector. So you can see the situation was very puzzling. So because this deficit was indeed confirmed by all experiments. But then what was the explanation behind? So perhaps the theory was wrong. The theory meaning the standard model of particle physics or the standard solar model that was providing the predictions for the solar neutrinos. Or could be that experiments were wrong, but come on, all of them were experiencing these deficits. And then the third possibility was that something was happening to neutrinos in their way from the sun to the earth, okay? So the situation stayed like that. And then you can wonder also why the results are so different between the different experiments. One should have in mind that the different experiments are sensitive to different types of neutrinos. So for instance, the radiochemical experiments using chlorine or gallium are only sensitive to electron neutrinos, okay, through these processes. While, for instance, the experiments using Water-Cherenkov detection as Super Kamiokande, since they measure neutrino electron scattering, they are sensitive to charge current and neutral current processes. So they are sensitive to all flavors, not with the same strength, because electron neutrinos experience charge current and neutral current, while nu mu nu tau only experience neutral current. But there is the sensitivity to the different flavors. And also very important, given the threshold of the reaction, of the detection reaction, each experiment is sensitive to a different part of the spectrum. And this, you can see it here in this plot. I think Maria already showed this plot on the first lecture. So this is the solar neutrino spectrum provided by the standard solar model. So telling you the flux of neutrinos produced in each of the nuclear reactions that produce neutrinos in the sun. So this is when we talk about PP neutrinos, are the neutrinos produced in the PP process, and this is the spectrum here. They are the most abundant here. Or for instance, boron neutrinos here. But then you can see that depending on the threshold, each experiment is sensitive to a part. So, for instance, gallium has a very low threshold, so it's sensitive essentially to all the neutrinos, same as scintillator detectors like Borexin. But if we consider, for instance, chlorine has a threshold of about 0.8 megaelectron volts, so it's not sensitive to the PP neutrinos. Or the Water-Cherenkov have a threshold around 5 MeV, so it's not sensitive to the neutrinos below that energy. So then you can imagine that there is not only that they are sensitive to different flavors, but they are sensitive to the different parts of the spectrum. This is why the results in one case is 30%, other is 40, other is 50. And it is also related to the neutrino survival probability, as we will see at the end of the lecture. Okay? Good. So this is about solar neutrinos. So we just had this very puzzling situation. But there was another situation similar in the atmospheric sector. Atmospheric neutrinos are neutrinos that are produced due to the interaction of cosmic rays with the nuclei in the atmosphere. In these processes, pions are produced, pions decay to muons, muon neutrinos, and then muon decays to electrons and more neutrinos. Okay? And at the end, you can see these muon neutrinos and electron neutrinos are detected, for instance, in Super Kamiokande or other experiments, in all the directions. So in that case, since cosmic rays arrive isotropically, then you have one detector, you have detection in 360 degrees. Okay? Okay, so atmospheric neutrinos were first observed in 1965 in a gold mine in South Africa by Rhines. You remember Rhines, the one that discovered electron neutrino, and also the Kolar gold fields in India. Thank you, Marcus. And then, I mean, they just measure muon neutrinos using this process. Okay, but okay, they were measured, but at some point the interest on atmospheric neutrinos was lost. There was no interest. The interest on atmospheric neutrinos came back once there was some interest in designing some experiments to try to discover proton decay. You know, these grand unified theories predict that protons should decay as neutrons, and then there were many experiments trying to search for this proton decay. At that point, atmospheric muon neutrinos were a background for those experiments for proton decay. So then people start caring again for atmospheric neutrinos, okay? And so it was in the 80s, there was, for instance, these 3 experiments searching for proton decay, Kamiokande, because Kamiokande, now perhaps you know it because it measures solar neutrinos, supernova neutrinos, what will happen atmospheric, but the acronym of Kamiokande is Kamioka Nucleon Decay Experiment. So it was an experiment for nucleon decay. And then there was Kamiokande, then IMB in the USA, and Frejus in France. So these three experiments were searching for proton decay, and as a side calculation, they were just controlling the background coming from atmospheric neutrinos. And what they found, I mean, they didn't find the proton decay so far, but they found interesting things for atmospheric neutrinos. So first of all, in the 80s, the IMB experiment showed that the ratio of muon neutrinos over electron neutrinos was not in agreement with the predictions. I mean, you can see, according to the processes that produce the neutrinos from the cosmic ray interaction, one should expect more or less 2 muon neutrinos for 1 electron neutrino. I mean, this is an approximation because, of course, at the high energies, the decay length of the muon is longer, and then the ratio is a bit smaller, okay? Larger, sorry. But then in principle, one can approximate this ratio for 2. But then there were some measurements, not only for IMB, but also for Frejus, other experiments, NuSec, and Kamiokande, Super Kamiokande, and they found that this ratio was not really like that. There were fewer muon neutrinos than expected. Okay, there was something going on there. And later on, the Kamiokande experiment found that there was a deficit. So there was a deficit in muon neutrinos, but this deficit was dependent on the distance traveled by the neutrino and their energy. You can see here this plot from Kamiokande. So the black dots are the dots corresponding to electron neutrinos, and these are essentially fine. So the data coincide with the Monte Carlo. They are around 1, okay? But if you compare the data with the Monte Carlo for muon neutrinos, you see that the ratio, there is a deficit, but the deficit is not flat, but it is larger for values of for larger values of L over E. Okay, meaning that for larger distances traveled by the neutrinos, then there is a larger deficit. Okay. So finally, I mean, it's true that with these results, one can conclude, with the results, perhaps one can conclude that there were some oscillations because the neutrinos traveling in longer directions were disappearing. But still, the statistics in Kamiokande was not good enough to resolve statistically strongly this problem, because the size of Kamiokande was around 3 kilotons, so statistics was not that good. Then one had to wait up to Super Kamiokande with 50 kilotons and much more statistics. And then in 1998, finally, the atmospheric neutrino oscillations were discovered in Super Kamiokande. So here you have the slides from Professor Takaki Kajita. So you have the slide from the announcement in 1988, and also the improved slide in 2016, and then you can see that it was confirmed what it was observed before in Kamiokande. So this is the deficit of muon neutrinos, and then the deficit of muon neutrinos is larger. So here you have these bars correspond to the Monte Carlo, the cross corresponds to the experimental data, and then you see that this is the zenith angle, so meaning that for larger zenith angles, so neutrinos coming from above, essentially the prediction coincides more or less with the measurement. But for a zenith angle for neutrinos coming from below, in that case, there is a disagreement. There are less atmospheric neutrinos than predicted, because in that case, those neutrinos travel longer distances and then they disappear in this way. They were transformed to other flames. So for this result, Professor Kajita got the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2015. And finally, it was clear that the explanation behind the atmospheric neutrino anomaly was flavor oscillations between muon neutrinos and tau neutrinos. And this was the first evidence in favor of the non-zero neutrino masses, because as we will see, these processes of oscillations only can happen if neutrinos have a mass. Okay. So we go back to the solar anomaly. We just leave it there because now we are in 2001. If you remember, we had in the solar sector this puzzling situation with different experiments showing different results. But it was not clear what's going on. And then it was proposed this experiment, Sudbury Neutrino Observatory, SNO, in Canada. And the novel thing of this experiment was that it was proposed to measure, to detect solar neutrinos using 3 different processes. So it was a detector using heavy water. So instead of water as Kamiokande, Super Kamiokande, it was using heavy water. And it was 1 kiloton of heavy water. And then the idea was to detect solar neutrinos using elastic scattering, essentially the same as Super Kamiokande, okay? Sensitive to all the flavors. Also, charge currents on deuterium. We have heavy water, then we have deuterium. That process was only sensitive to electroneutrinos and neutral current processes with deuterium as well. In that case, this process was sensitive to all flavors with the same strength, because this is a purely neutral current process. Elastic scattering combines neutral current with charge current only here, and purely neutral current. So it provides three different ways to measure, in complementary ways to measure solar neutrinos. And at the end, with these three different measurements, it was possible to measure very accurately the flux of the different flavors in the solar neutrino spectrum. So you can have here the results, the different bands. In red, you have the charge current band coming from this process. In blue, the neutral current band, and in green, the elastic scattering band. In the plane of flux of electron neutrinos and flux of muon and tau neutrinos. And you can see that where all they intersect, we have the measurement of the electron neutrino flux and muon and tau neutrino flux. And the very important thing is that for the first time, we had like an evidence that the number of electron neutrinos arriving to the Earth was 1/3 of the ones emitted from the sun. Okay? And if we just measure all flavor of neutrinos, the total amount, this result was in agreement with the predictions of the standard solar model. So the standard solar model was essentially fine. So the prediction was checked by the measurement of the neutral current. But with the charge current, we got that only 1/3 of electron neutrinos were arriving to the Earth as electron neutrinos. So with these results, one can conclude that what is happening, so from the three different solutions, you remember the experiments were not wrong, the theory was not wrong, something was going on with the neutrinos in their way from the sun to the Earth. And what was going on is that they were converting this flavor. So the neutrinos leaving the sun as nu E, only nu E were arriving as 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3 in the different flavors to the Earth. What was not clear by then was which was the mechanism behind this flavor conversion, okay? Because in the case of the atmospheric neutrinos, since we have that there is this deficit that depends on the distance, then you can get this deficit of the distance with oscillations, flavor oscillations driven by the mass. But since in that case, the distance between the sun and the Earth is that large, it's not trivial to reconstruct the exact conversion mechanism that explains the conversion. Then, by then there were several options in the market, not only neutrino oscillations, but there was some other. Indeed, I did my master thesis in another solution that was ruled out 1 year after, because there were many different solutions allowed, okay? So still, it was a conversion, but it was not clear the mechanism. And of course, R. McDonald got the Nobel Prize together with Kajita for this discovery of the SNO experiment. So there is no solar neutrino problem anymore. So you remember these bands we have seen before, just measuring 30%, 50%, 40%. Once we measure all the flavors in the SNO experiment with the neutral current process, all neutrinos are there. Okay, so this finally solved the solar neutrino problem. Other important results in neutrino oscillations. So just 1 year after the Kaplan reactor experiment, an experiment in Japan using reactor neutrinos. Reactor neutrinos, you know, are electron antineutrinos, and although they are antineutrinos and solar are neutrinos, if one assumes CPT conservation, one can guess that the process, the procedure behind the conversion mechanism should be the same in both cases. So then if one studies the conversion in reactor experiments, one can apply the same mechanism to solar neutrinos. So this was the idea behind the design of the Kaplan experiment. So trying to test if really neutrino oscillations was the mechanism behind the solar neutrino problem. And in 2002, it was proven that it was the case. So in this reactor experiment, there was observed a deficit of reactor neutrinos that was consistent with the explanation of solar neutrinos, of the solar neutrino problem in terms of oscillation. Okay, results, other important results. Also in 2002, there was the first measurement of oscillations in the K2K accelerator experiment. Later on, we will see at the end of this lecture or tomorrow, other accelerator experiments measured also these oscillations. In 2011, nu E to nu E oscillations were observed in long baseline in long-distance accelerator experiments. And in 2011 as well, the double show reactor experiments confirmed the oscillations between reactor antineutrinos over baselines of 1 kilometer. So there are, I mean, I just explained in more detail this atmospheric and solar anomaly, but since then, in 2002, there have been many results in neutrino oscillations. And so far, this phenomenon has been observed in solar, atmospheric, reactor, and accelerator neutrino experiments. Okay, so if you remember when we were discussing yesterday about neutrinos in the standard model, we saw just the picture over here. So in the standard model, flavors do not mix. If you produce in your source nu E together with electron, in your detector, you will for sure detect an electron as a signal that an electron neutrino passed by. And the same for other flavors. However, what happens in these experiments is that starting with a source with a given flavor, for instance, the sun only produces solar electron neutrinos, you get to the detector and you get 1/3 of mu neutrinos and 1/3 of tau neutrinos. What is going on there? How can we understand this thing? So to understand this thing, one is to consider, and this is just the phenomenon behind the neutrino oscillations. One is to consider that the flavor states are combinations of states with definite mass. So these nu alpha are states we have precise properties under interaction, so they have precise defined flavor. But you know, this is very basic quantum mechanics. You have two observables, but then if these two observables don't commute, in principle they don't share the basis of eigenstates, but they are combinations, one of the other. You can rotate from one base to the other. So this will be the case. So the nu E, nu mu will be the states with defined flavor, but they will be just a combination of other states we have definite mass. Okay, very basic quantum mechanics. So then if you produce electron neutrino in your source, at the end, this electron neutrino is a combination of states with different mass. And the states that you know how to propagate, according to Schrödinger equations, are the eigenstates of the Hamiltonian. These are the eigenstates with definite energy, with definite mass. So then you need to do this, to express the amount of nu E in terms of the components in the neutrino mass basis, then you know how to propagate. You know how to propagate nu1, nu2, and nu3. You don't know how to propagate nu E because it's not an eigenstate of the Hamiltonian. Then you propagate nu1, nu2, and nu3, and after some distance L, where you put a detector, it may happen then when you project again, when you put a detector and you project again in the flavor basis, perhaps the state now is not an electron neutrino, it's a different combination. Okay, and this is what is going on there. This is how we can understand the phenomenon of neutrino oscillations. So essentially it comes from this, from the neutrino mixing. So flavor neutrinos are an admixture of states with definite mass. Okay, so then usually this mixing between flavor eigenstates here and mass eigenstate mu k are described using this neutrino mixing matrix, also called Pontecorvo, Maki, Nakagawa, Sakata. Okay, for all the people that was doing these jobs on neutrino oscillations. So I put this exercise yesterday in the list. So maybe, I don't know, we can just see a little bit and then you can think a little bit with more calm then later or tomorrow in the discussion session. We need to understand how many parameters we need to describe this mixing matrix. So this mixing matrix U is a n times n in general. So we can discuss already 3 neutrinos, but as you know, I mean, tomorrow when we will discuss beyond the standard model physics, we'll consider the possibility of having extra fields, for instance, sterile neutrinos. So I think it's more general to talk about n times n mixing matrix with n general states. So in that case, this matrix is a n times n unitary matrix, and we will need n squared real parameters to describe it, because we will need n squared complex parameters, then taking into account the unitarity conditions, then we remain just with n squared real parameters, okay? Then if you do some counting, usually in these rotation matrices, we differentiate between mixing angles, that are angles that connect to the different states, to different rows, let's say, and phases. So using some combinatories, you can see that if you consider mixing angles taking into account n elements taking 2 by 2, So from these n square real parameters, this could be called mixing angles, okay, like rotation angles between different planes, like in a standard rotation matrix. And then all the other will be phases. What are not angles would be phases. The thing is that not all these phases are observables, okay? And some of them will be unphysical, and then we could remove it. And how we understand how many phases we can remove? So we should have in mind that the relevant thing here is the Lagrangian, and in the Lagrangian, if you remember yesterday, we discussed about the leptonic weak charge current, where we have the field of the charged lepton and the field of the neutrino. And here is where the mixing matrix enters, because in the weak charge current, we have the flavor neutrino, but now we should remember that the flavor neutrino is a combination of nu k, sorry, this is a typo, it should be a k here, nu k, and the mixing matrix. Then, from the different phases in U, some of them could be removed because could be reabsorbed in the redefinition of the fields. You know, there is some freedom to redefine the fields of the charged leptonic, of the charged leptons and the neutrinos. Then some of these phases will be not physical because it could be reabsorbed, okay? How many could be reabsorbed? So in the case of Dirac neutrinos, the full Lagrangian should be invariant under global phase transformation of Dirac fields. So we have these Dirac fields, L alpha and nu k, and then we do this global phase transformation, okay? So then we can introduce 2n phases. If we consider n states, 2n phases. Then we will have the possibility to remove 2n phases, but we should have in mind that we should leave one phase, because the Lagrangian for Dirac neutrinos should be, should be invariant under a global phase. So then we can remove not the 2n phases, but only 2n minus 1. So for Dirac neutrinos, from these phases, 2n minus 1 are unphysical, so we can remove them. Okay, and with this counting, you may have how many phases are physical, because the other ones can be reabsorbed in the redefinition of the fields. I think it is better if you just look in more detail in the exercises. What happens for Majorana neutrinos? There is a difference here, because if you remember, for Majorana neutrinos, we had the Majorana mass term that behaves slightly different from the case of Dirac. This is the mass term for Majorana neutrinos here, okay? Then if we do a rephasing of the field of the neutrinos, unfortunately, this Lagrangian contained in this term is not invariant under this global transformation. So we don't have the freedom to rephase, to get away the phases of the neutrino fields. Okay, in that case, we can only remove the phases, we can only reabsorb the phases in the redefinition of the charged lepton fields. Okay, so in the case of Majorana, we can only remove n phases. We don't have to keep a global phase, because this global phase could be the conservation of lepton number that is not there for Majorana neutrinos. So then we can remove n phases. So in that case, the counting for the phases will be different here. Okay, I know it's a lot of information, but I think it's interesting just to have some counting of the parameters. So at the end, from all the physical phases we have seen in the matrix, part of them will be Dirac, the ones we have seen before, because they are there when neutrinos are Dirac, okay? And those phases have an effect in neutrino oscillations, as we will see. And then the other phases that are not present in the case of Dirac, because we have reabsorbed, they are Majorana phases, purely Majorana. Only appear if neutrinos are of Majorana nature, okay? And in that case, these phases do not appear in neutrino oscillations, but have some effect in neutrinoless double beta decay experiments, okay? So I know it's a bit tricky, but yeah, I think it's interesting to have this in mind in order to do the counting of parameters. Okay, so now we apply those numbers to the most simplest scenario of two neutrino mixing. So two neutrino mixing, if you do the counting of these parameters here, you will have one mixing angle, depends on one mixing angle, and 0 Dirac phases, you just put n equal to 2, and one Majorana phase, okay? But then, since Majorana phases do not affect neutrino oscillations, so we don't care essentially to study neutrino oscillations. So we have this mixing matrix over here. While in the case of 3 neutrino mixing, we will have 3 mixing angles, 1 Dirac phase, plus 2 Majorana phases, okay? Again, the Majorana phases do not enter in oscillation, so here I'm only writing these mixing angles. This corresponds to cosinus theta 2, 3, cosinus theta 1, 3, cosinus theta 1, 2, and the phase, the Dirac CP phase delta there. Okay, and I'm putting these different colors because, as we will see, at first approximation, every one of the three mixing angles are responsible for oscillations in one of the different sectors. For instance, theta 23 is responsible for oscillations in atmospheric experiments and disappearance in accelerator. Theta 13 is the angle behind the oscillations in reactor experiments and appearance signal in long baseline accelerator. And theta 12 is the angle that explains solar neutrino oscillations and the reactor oscillations in CAMLA. Okay, so now we have already defined the mixing matrix, but let's see how can we calculate the oscillation probability. This was also part of the exercises I was suggesting in the sheet yesterday. So we start from the point that neutrino flavor states are admixtures of the mass eigenstates, and as I was telling you, the states we know how to propagate, the states we know how they evolve, are the states with definite mass, the nu J, okay? So then for those states, we can apply just Schrödinger equation, okay? So in the basis of the mass eigenstates, nu J, this is the form of the Hamiltonian, so this is diagonal with the different energies. And then using the Schrödinger equation, one can calculate, very trivial to solve this differential equation, one can solve the evolution of the nu G over time. And then one needs just to add a phase, a global phase, with the energy and momentum and the time and the distance traveled by the neutrinos, okay? So if we consider ultra-relativistic neutrinos, then one can do this approach. One can consider that energy essentially is equal to the momentum, and then one can, this term here, so for ultra-relativistic, you can have the neutrinos travel to the speed of light, so you can identify time with the distance travel, and then you can calculate this AJ minus PJ, doing this approximation for this value here. So then this temporal evolution can be simplified to this value here. So this would give us the time evolution of the mass eigenstates, neutrino mass eigenstates, okay? So now we need to calculate the neutrino oscillations probability. So we need to consider the different steps in the procedure. So first of all, we have to consider the production. We have the production, neutrinos on a given neutrino flavor alpha is produced in combination with a charged lepton of flavor alpha as well. So then, as I was telling before, the thing we need to do here is to realize that this nu alpha is a combination of the states with definite mass, okay? And to do that, we need the mixing matrix that we have just characterized before. So now, after the production, we already have our signal in terms of the mass eigenstates that we know how to propagate because we have calculated just before. We have used the Schrödinger equation, and we know that this nu J propagates just adding this phase over here. And then once we go to the detector, again, we need to project back the mass eigenstates to the flavor eigenstate because we just detect neutrinos through these weak interactions. Okay, so again, to project using the mixing matrix. So in order to calculate the amplitude of the process, we need to combine the three steps. So if we start with a neutrino in t equal to 0 of flavor alpha, and we want to calculate the amplitude to get a neutrino flavor beta at times t, so we need just to combine these three parts. So the production, that is essentially the projection from one base to the other, the propagation using the Schrödinger equation, and the projection back to the flavor bases. Okay? And then to calculate the probability, we just need to do the square, the modulus square of this amplitude. So then you have it here. So from this detection and production, you get a term of the mixing matrix, and this term is the one coming from the evolution. And it's as simple as that, okay? Then if you want to get the formula, then one needs to operate a little bit. This was one of my proposals. Then if you consider also the unitarity of the mixing matrix, then you can just go from this expression to the more general expression here for the neutrino oscillation probability in terms of the elements of the mixing matrix and the delta m squared, that is the mass difference between the different states involved in the procedure. Okay. Again, this is only a approximate derivation, okay? Because we have not considered here, for instance, that in the practice at the experiments there are some uncertainties in the measurement of the energy because our detectors are not perfect. They have some resolution. Also, we have some uncertainties in the measurement of the distance depending on, we cannot estimate very well where the neutrino has interacted. And also, we have been used the treatment of neutrinos as plane waves. And you know that to do it properly in quantum mechanics, one needs to consider that it should be a localized object, and the formal thing would be using the wave packet treatment. So you are interested in just trying to derive the formula with all these very fine details. You may have all the information here in this book by Carlo Giunti and Kim, but the thing is that at the end, the result is the same. Okay? So you can do it with all this. There has been a lot of discussion about that, but it still is good to understand that this is an approximation. But if we do toward the very complicated derivation, at the end, the result is essentially the same. So just using this formula is very good. Okay. Okay. So what about the properties of neutrino oscillations? So there are just some properties. So you can see that, of course, due to the unitarity of the mixing matrix, you know that the probability should be conserved. If you just sum up the oscillation probability from nu alpha to all the possible nu beta channels, it should be equal to 1. Okay. Neutrino oscillations are not sensitive to the masses of the neutrinos, but only to the difference of the masses, because as you have seen, the important part appears in the phases, and in the phases at the end, you have the subtraction between the different phases. So the important thing, you have a global phase that is not relevant because it is cancelled in the calculation of the probability. The relevant thing is the mass square differences between the different states. So oscillations are not sensitive to the absolute masses of neutrinos. In the case of antineutrinos, the formula is exactly the same, but one just needs to change U by U complex. Okay. Since there are some phases in the matrix, we have seen that there are some phases there. These phases induce CP violation, meaning that the probability of nu alpha going to nu beta, in general, if phases are different from 0, will be different to the probability in the CP symmetric case that will be anti-nu alpha going to anti-nu beta. Okay, and this is one of the things that is trying to be measured at experiments. Okay, there are usually in the experiments there are measurements with a beam of neutrinos and then with a beam of antineutrinos, and trying to compare, because this comparison will tell us if there is a CP violation or not, because still we don't know the value of the CP violation. So these I have already seen. Neutrino oscillations do not depend on the absolute neutrino mass scale, but also on the Majorana phases. Majorana phases do not appear there. Neutrino oscillations violate flavor lepton number conservation. The lepton number associated to each flavor, but conserve the total number. Okay. So concerning the mass square differences, if we have 3 neutrinos in the scheme of 3 neutrinos, we have essentially 2 differences of masses, delta m to 1 and delta m 3-1 square. Delta m to 1 square has been measured by Solar plus Kamlan. We will see later. And we know for sure that it's positive. Due to the observation of matter effects in the sun, we know that this value is positive. So we know that what we call M1 is lighter than what we call M2. Okay, what we call M1 is the state with the largest contribution of electron neutrino. So this state is lighter than what we call nu2. But concerning the other mass split in delta M31 square, that is measured in atmospheric experiments, accelerators, and source baseline reactors, we still don't know the sign. There are some indications in favor of a positive value, meaning that M3 is larger than M1, but the results are not conclusive yet. So since we don't know, we usually have to consider about 2 possibilities that we call the 2 possible mass orderings. So in the case of delta M31 square positive, this is what we call the normal mass ordering. Normal because the states with the largest components of electrons will be the lighter, as for the charged leptons. Okay. And in the case of considering delta M31 square negative, this is what we call inverted mass ordering, because again, in that case, the electron neutrino will be mostly in the heaviest part of the spectrum. Okay. So sometimes, if maybe you have seen already, when one discusses about these results of neutrino oscillations, we are discussing this for normal, this for inverted, because the situation is not yet clear. Okay. So let's try to understand how these oscillations work. So we will start with the simplest case of 2 neutrino oscillations. So we have seen this is the mixing matrix. then we now take the general formula and then we just particularize to two neutrinos. In the case of two neutrinos, this formula with the elements of the mixing matrix stays like that, and this is the oscillation probability from a neutrino of flavor alpha oscillating to a neutrino of flavor beta. So it depends on the mixing angle, okay, and the delta m squared, the distance traveled by the neutrino, and its energy. And here it is crucial, in order to understand the different regimes that could be observed in an experiment, to define the oscillation phase. The oscillation phase is the phase here inside the sinus, okay? And then when we are considering experiments that are observing these neutrinos over short distances, in such a way that the oscillation phase is very small, okay? In that case, there is no time for oscillations to be developed. So short distances with phase much below 1, there is no time to oscillations, and then probability is essentially 0. So no time in order to oscillations could start. For long distances where the oscillation phase is of order 1, there is what we have the stronger sensitivity to the oscillations, because we have the larger value here of the optimal value of the argument of the sinus square function. So then we can observe the oscillation pattern. And then in the case of very long distances, with the oscillation phase is much larger than 1, what happens is that the phase is very large, then the oscillations are very fast. And then since our detectors are not perfect and we don't have a perfect energy resolution, at the end we cannot differentiate these very fast oscillations. We cannot resolve. And what one can see just to do an average over the oscillations. So this you can see better in this plot here. So this is for the phase, small values of the oscillation phase. So no time to develop oscillations, very small values of the phase. Then the optimal phase, where there is the first oscillation maximum. So this is where the phase is around 1. So this is the perfect place to observe the oscillation. You can see here the oscillation length between the first and second oscillation maximum. And this part is what I was telling you. When the phase is very large, the oscillations are very, very fast, and you cannot really solve. The energy resolution of your detector cannot tell you if you are here or you are here. So at the end, what you can conclude is you can only estimate an average value of the oscillations. And what is done is that this term is averaged to 1/2, and then in that case, oscillations are averaged to this value over here. Okay, so this is to understand the different regimes where the experiments could work. Okay. But so far we have discussed only neutrino oscillations in vacuum. What happens if neutrinos traverse matter? So things get a bit more complicated, as we came much more in supernovas in the talk we have seen yesterday, the several talks. I'm not going to discuss about supernova, just very constant matter. Yeah. So what happens? If neutrinos pass through matter, then neutrinos will experience charge current and neutral current interactions with the material, with the fermions, with the particles in the medium. And these interactions will induce an effective potential over the neutrinos. And then there will be some interactions coming from these charge current processes mediated by a W boson, or processes mediated by the Z boson, these neutral current processes. The thing is that those interactions essentially will modify the value of the mixing angles in vacuum. So there is some value, this theta mixing angle from the mixing matrix, okay, that this could be measured, but in matter, this mixing angle is modified due to the presence of this potential, okay? And also the different mass eigenstates will be modified as a result. So one is to consider the effective four-fermion interaction Hamiltonian, in that case, considering charge current and neutral current, okay? The one here. Usually we consider ordinary matter, okay? Electrons, protons, and neutrons. In that case, in order to derive the matter-induced potential, we can integrate over all the variables of the fermions in the medium, okay? And if we consider the most general case, we can consider a medium that is unpolarized, that is not relativistic, and that is neutral, okay? Just to think simpler. So in that case, if we do these assumptions, then we can calculate the potential induced by these interactions to neutrinos, and this will be the expression. This is a diagonal matrix with an entry for electron neutrinos that will experience charge current interactions with electrons. So this is proportional to the density of electrons in the medium. And also there will be a term for neutral current interactions that will be common to the three different flavors. So this is why you have here, here, and here. And this will be the neutral current interactions of neutrinos with neutrons. So in principle, here we should consider as well the neutral current interactions of neutrinos with protons and with electrons, but they cancel each other. So at the end, if you do the calculation, you will have here the entries corresponding to the interaction of electron neutrinos with electrons, density of electrons in the medium, and the part corresponding to the interaction of neutrinos with neutrons, and this Nn is the density of neutrons in the medium, okay? So, yeah, so this is why we have considered a medium only with electrons, not a medium with muons or with tau, okay? Neutral current, as you can see, this is a diagonal matrix. This is a common entry to the three different flavors. So this -1/2, and n. So this is like a common term in the effective Hamiltonian. So at the end, since it has the same effect for all flavors, you know it contributes with a total phase, so we can forget it. So if we are studying only active neutrinos, since the effect of neutral currents with the interaction of neutral currents of neutrinos with neutrons is the same for all of them, it's a common phase for all of them, then we just can forget about it. One should be careful if considering other scenarios, as for instance, scenarios with sterile neutrinos, because with sterile neutrinos, if we have now a matrix that is 4 times 4, here there will be a fourth entry that will be 0, because sterile neutrinos do not have any interaction. In that case, we cannot just forget about the neutral current, because the steriles will not have this component, okay? But for three neutrinos, we just can't forget about this. Okay, so at the end, if we consider as a very good approximation that the density of electrons, we just care of the density of electrons. If we are going to consider a medium where Ne is constant. In practice, this is not very realistic, because maybe only if we analyze accelerator experiments where neutrinos only traverse the crust of the Earth. In that case, one can assume constant density. Of course, if we need to study oscillations in the Earth, or the whole Earth, or the Sun, this is not realistic. But just as a first approach, we can consider density of electrons constant. In that case, you can resolve the system analytically, because the only change with respect to this oscillations in vacuum is that what we were calling mixing angle in vacuum, this theta, is now modified to this theta m. This will be the mixing angle in matter. And the expression of this mixing angle in matter is calculated in terms of the mixing angle in vacuum, theta, and this A, that is a factor that encodes the effective potential induced by matter. So the difference between vacuum and constant matter is just the formula will be the same for the oscillations, but one needs to consider that the mixing angle, theta, will be changed to the effective in matter, and also the mass splitting will be different concerning the one in vacuum. Okay, and in both cases, we have the dependence of the effective potential over there. Okay? And then I don't know if you can realize that there could be a resonance. The nice thing about these formulas is that there could be a resonance, because if in the case of having A equal to cos 2 theta, okay, this could give to a resonance behavior, because starting with a mixing angle theta that could be very small, okay, if you have this resonance, this condition applying, then you can get a mixing angle in matter very large, theta n very large, okay? And this is an effect that is essentially comes from the matter effect. So starting from a mixing angle between neutrinos very small, matter can enhance and give you a maximal mixing between the neutrinos in matter, okay? And this can be seen, this is the so-called MSW effect, that it was discovered by these guys here, Wolfenstein, Mikheyev, and Smirnov. And it's one of the crucial things to understand the oscillation of neutrino oscillation in the sun. So you have here this the formula, the mixing angle in matter. So as I told you, the sign of the potential changes for antineutrinos. Then here is a minus for neutrinos and a plus for antineutrinos. So then in the case of having the value of A much smaller than cos 2 theta, okay, the matter term that is A is encoded in A is much smaller than the mixing angle, then the matter effect is very small. And at the end, this is very small, and essentially you get that theta m is equal to theta. So you have oscillations like in vacuum, okay? That is when we are here, very small values of A. at the end, oscillations are essentially like in vacuum, and oscillations for neutrinos are the same as for antineutrinos here on the corner. Okay. In the opposite case, when matter is very strong, when A is much larger than cos 2 theta, in that case, matter effects dominate. Okay, this is much larger, and at the end, you get that the mixing angle in matter, independently of the mixing angle in vacuum, goes to pi over 2, is maximal mixing. Oh, sorry, oscillations are suppressed. That is here. We are here in these strong matter effects over here. But then, in the medium, we have the resonance. Once A is equal to cos 2 theta, for neutrinos, okay, because here I'm considering A positive. Since A is positive, here the resonance only happens for neutrinos. As you can see, the red line, not for antineutrinos. In that case, the resonance takes place, okay? These go to 0, and then sinus squared to theta m is 1, independently of theta. And then theta m is 45 degrees, maximal mixing. And then you have this resonance over there. And then the important thing here is to notice that in that case, the resonance condition is satisfied for neutrinos if delta m is positive. Okay, so here I have considered delta m positive, A positive. And this is why I get the resonance for neutrinos. But if I allow the possibility of having delta m negative, having A negative, the resonance may happen for antineutrinos. And this is a tool to measure the sign of delta m squared through matter effects. Okay, because if I observe the resonance in the channel that I expect, I can say, okay, this is delta m positive or this is delta m negative. Okay, so since in the case of solar neutrinos, resonance has been observed, okay, and we know solar neutrinos are neutrinos, not antineutrinos, this is why we know that delta m to 1 is positive, because the resonance has been observed in the sun. Okay, I'm going to just jump over this because I consider just a constant matter density. If anyone is interested in studying the deviations of this scenario, just considering some variation of the density of electrons, there is here on the slide to understand how you can calculate, in that case, the probability. I will split it. And then, yeah. So to understand how to calculate the solar, the survival probability of solar neutrinos, in the two neutrino approximation, one should understand that neutrino is born at the center of the sun as a combination of the mass eigenstate in the core of the sun. Because remember, we need to do this projection over the mass basis, but we're in the center of the sun. The eigenstates there are not nu1 and nu2, are nu1 in matter and nu2 in matter. And the mixing angle is theta in matter, okay? So in that case, once we do the projection between nu e to the different mass eigenstates, in the case of the sun, the density of the sun is not varying very largely. So then one can consider that nu1 m and nu1 2m evolve adiabatically without mixing. And then they arrive to the surface of the sun as nu1m and nu2m. So then in that case, one can calculate the survival probability at the Earth in that way. So we first project at the production the probability of nu e to nu1, and then back from nu1 to nu e, and the same for nu2. So we get these possibilities. Then at the production, the mixing angle that controls the projection is theta m. So this PE1 at production is cos 2 theta m, and PA2 at production is sin squared theta m. And at the detection, since we can consider the detection in the vacuum, because even though the detector is in the Earth, the density is much smaller than in the sun. At the end, we get that this will be the formula to the survival probability of neutrinos, of solar neutrinos. Okay? So this is the formula over here. Now we need to put in practice what we have learned about the resonance in the matter effects. So in the center of the sun, this parameter alpha that controls the matter effects is essentially 2 times the energy of the neutrino, the potential, and delta m squared. So this value, essentially the potential, gives us this value of 0.2 energy MeV, and this value for the mass splitting. So this on one hand. On the other hand, since the resonance occurs when A is equal to cos 2 theta, and we know that the mixing angle theta 1, 2 for neutrinos is such that cos 2 theta is 0.4, so we know that the resonance will happen once A was equal to 0.4. In that case, there will be the resonance. So you just need to do some numbers, considering this is the value for the delta m splitting, the resonance value, the energy value for the resonance will be 2 mega electron volt, around 2 mega electron volt. So for neutrinos in the sun, we can expect this resonance happening at 2 mega electron volt. And this is why here we can define the two different scenarios. So in the case of having energy below 2 MeV, remember, we are below of the resonance, then in that case, the matter effect is very small. Essentially, oscillations happen like in vacuum. So the mixing angle is the one like in vacuum, okay? And then this will be the oscillation formula here. While for energies above 2 mega electron volts, matter effects are important, okay? And in that case, the theta m will be pi over 2. Then applying this formula over here, putting theta m pi over 2, we will have the probability will be sinus square of theta. And this is the ingredient that we needed in order, you remember when I explained the different amounts of neutrinos that were detected at the different experiments, 30, 40, 50. And I tried to explain that the different quantities is because they observe different flavors, also they observe different energy spectrums, but also because of that. Because in the case of low energy neutrinos, low energy solar neutrinos, the survival probability is essentially 0.6. Once we have understood how things happen inside the sun. While for high energy neutrinos, the boron neutrinos, the probability is essentially 1/3. That is what is not measured. So this is the third factor that we needed to understand the different factors on the different experiments. So not only the different neutrinos, the different spectrum, but also how oscillations happen in the sun. Okay, and just to finish, let me tell you that as I was telling before. So this is the mixing angle in matter. This is the resonance. Since the resonance has been observed, because this behavior has been observed, we have now experiments measuring this part of the spectrum, borexino, gallium, etc., and they are in agreement with these values. We have experiments measuring in this part, Super-Kamiokande, SNO, also borexino. So this has been proved. So this is working well. So we know that this picture is valid. So we know that the resonance is going on. And then this is why we know that delta M to 1 is positive, because the resonance happens for neutrinos and not for antineutrinos. Let me tell you that this effect, of course, will apply also for atmospheric neutrinos. Atmospheric neutrinos will traverse the Earth mantle and core. And in that case, there will be no matter effects in the oscillation channel between nu mu and nu tau, because remember, nu mu and nu tau, they have the same neutral current interaction. So then we can forget about this. But when we will study the oscillation channel between nu mu and nu e, then the interactions are different, because nu e has charge current that nu mu does not have. In that case, matter effects will be important. Then the idea would be there will be a resonance in that channel, so using similar formula, with a minus for neutrinos, a plus for antineutrinos. However, here we still don't have the answer. The thing is that matter effects here are sensitive to are harder to observe because they are proportional to the smallest mixing angle theta 1,3. P mu e is sensitive to theta 1,3, this is the smallest mixing angle. So even though we have very clear how to measure, this will be the idea, with the same idea, but this is much more difficult to measure than in the case of solar neutrinos. But if you can do the simulation, for instance, in the case of Super-Kamiokande, one can calculate how matter effects affect atmospheric neutrinos. These are the plots for the contour levels of probability in the nu mu channel for normal ordering and inverted ordering, okay, for neutrinos. And then you can see that there you can see a behavior a bit different from here. So this is exactly the resonance. This is where this is a theory, or a theoretical simulation. This is where the resonance would be. In that case, the resonance will be there in normal ordering for neutrinos because we are assuming delta M positive. Okay, here we have done the simulation for delta M positive, then the resonance will be here and not here. If I repeat the plot for antineutrinos, the result will be the opposite. The resonance will be here for inverted ordering. Okay, but still we don't know which is there are indications in favor of normal ordering, but still we don't know. So then you can see that the resonance appears over there. Okay, so with this, I think we can finish today, and then tomorrow we will continue with neutrino phenomenology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. Any urgent questions right now?
Yes, can you go back to the slide 36, please?
Sorry?
The MSW 36,
Yeah.
yes, this one. So I understand that they have the result for up to around 10, 20 MeV because of the solar neutrino observation. But do people also like do the calculation for this up to, like go to GeV?
But not here, because in principle you cannot expect, I mean, indeed this is done for solar neutrinos.
Yes.
And then you cannot expect that there are no fluxes of solar neutrinos over those energies. So they are up to 20 MeV, essentially.
Yeah, but well, we can talk later. Actually, this relates to my work, so yeah.
Okay. But it should be an exotic scenario, maybe, or...
Yeah, some kind of like dark matter.
Okay.
Okay, I do not see any urgent questions, so let's thank Mariam again and also Vivian for the great talk.